Hey there. Today I would like to tell you a little bit about something very typical for Vienna, and that's the Gemeindebauten. So it refers to public housing, and many of these buildings were constructed in the interwar period, meaning between 1919 and 1934. It's a time that's referred to as Red Vienna. Rotes Wien. So that started at the end of the First World War and lasted until the end of the First Republic in 1934. And as you can imagine, it was quite a difficult time. There were high rates of unemployment. People were very poor and living in very poor hygienic conditions. And there was a real housing crisis. And it was during that time when the Socialist Party of Austria came into power in Vienna. And they started a big reform project. And during that time period, they built more than 60,000 flats in these Gemeindebauten. They also built 25 public baths, and they financed it with a tax on luxury goods. About 40% of the finances came from taxes that were levied by the city. Today that's only about 10%, so a lot of things have changed. So here it says, the legendary Red Vienna was promoted very effectively in propaganda terms as an exemplary integrated model, as a social democratic paradise already realized in stages, right in the middle of a conservative republic. What they had failed to accomplish on a national level, the Austrian Social Democratic Workers' Party managed to achieve in Vienna, in an era of advanced economic liberalism, monocapitalism and nascent fascism, as a kind of island of real existing socialism or utopian socialism. And I think what made it so special was that it wasn't so much utopian, because that refers to a place that is an idea that doesn't exist yet. But Vienna built so many houses and so many things. It was a real experiment, one that was happening in front of people's eyes. And it really turned the lives of people to the better. Let's look at this old map. This is from 1931, and it says, Das neue Wien. Vienna of today. So here in the center you have the historic city center, of course, then the inner districts and the outer districts, which were often where the working class lived. Let's see what we find here. So in red we have municipal dwellings, meaning these Gemeindebauten that we're talking about. So we have one, for example, here, or here in these areas by the Danube, and also across the Danube on the other side. We have a couple of them here along the Gürtel, the city highway, and further out, right next to the park of the Habsburg Castle, and out here closer to the Viennese mountains. We also have some orange bits. These are called garden cities. A lot of them are across the Danube, and you can see these are quite big areas. We're going to look at an example of these later on. There's a here, in between these green areas, between the parks, and here by the Leinzer Tiergarten. So this is a very nice green area. And the reason these garden cities and the Gemeindebauten are often further out is because that was the property that was cheap to buy for the city of Vienna. So they built wherever they could get some land. Here in purple we have public buildings like hospitals, schools, also bridges and other monuments. And in dark blue we have public baths. So we have a big one here, the Gänsehofer along the Danube, together with the Arbeiterstrandbad, and another one up here. We have one here and here. So these are a bit hidden. The blue is quite dark, but they're all across Vienna, so up here. In green, of course, we have the public gardens. So that would be all along here by the Danube. In this large area towards the south, the Lobau, you have the Prater, an area which used to belong to the Habsburgs, the monarch family. The Augarten, the park by Schönbrunn, by the castle, and of course up here by the mountains. And in black you have public buildings such as the castle, the university, the parliament, the museums. So let's compare it with this map here. This one is exclusively of the Gemeindebauten. Again in 4 different colors. we're looking at the red ones. They were built until 1945. But you can see that they're all across Vienna. And the first one is this one here, Metzlandstaler Hof. It was built between 1920 and 1925. There are currently 252 flats. And it's located right here along the Gürtel, the city highway. Let's take a look. Alright, so this is what it looks like, the Metzlandstaler Hof. This is the facade that you see from the street. And in fact it doesn't look so different from many of the other houses that you find from the previous decades. But when you walk around to the other side, then you see a facade like this. What's very typical for these Gemeindebauten from that time period is that art was very important. The idea was that people shouldn't just have a place to live, to sleep and to eat, to relax. They should also live among art. And it should allow them to educate themselves. So that was very important. There's another one right next to it, the Matteotti Hof. It's named after an Italian socialist who lived from 1885 until 1924. And you can see there's some more art integrated into the facade. This is called a sgraffito. In fact, there are 4 different Gemeindebauten all next to each other. So the first one is this one here, the Metzlandstaler Hof. Then behind it you have the Matteotti Hof with 2 different courtyards and a street that goes right through it. On the side here you have the Roimannhof, named after the first socialist mayor of Vienna. That's this building here. And this is what people would often call the Volkspaläste, so the palaces of the people. Initially it was planned to be 16 stories high, which for Vienna is almost a high-rise, but the end it was built with 9 stories. And it did draw some criticism because it's not so much practical as iconic. It was meant to impress people who saw it. You can tell it says here, all the way on top, Gemeinde Wien, the city of Vienna, in red letters. So it was meant to also deliver a message. These are the kind of inscriptions that you find on all of the Gemeindebauten. It says, diese Wohnhausanlage wurde aus den Mitteln der Wohnbausteuer in den Jahren 1924 und 1925 von der Gemeinde Wien erbaut unter dem Bürgermeister Karl Seitz. So that basically translates to that this building was constructed by the municipality of Vienna in the years 1924 and 25, financed from the revenue of the residential construction tax. There was basically a tax on luxuries that was used to construct these houses. Here again you have these decorative elements. This time they are ceramic tiles. As you can see, when you walk down these steps, you get into a courtyard with benches where you can sit down under the trees, with fountains. So I think it's quite inviting. Here's another picture. These courtyards are very, very typical. This one even has a fountain. And there are plenty of balconies. And every room had a window. The principle was that people should have as much light as possible to keep them healthy. So every room had a window to the outside where you could get some sunlight. And here in the courtyards you also often had places for the children to play. This is one of the fountains that are really cute. It's a mother bear with her small bear in front of this building. Alright, so that's here along the Margaritan Group. That was the first one that was built. Now let's look at the one up here, the Karl Marx Hof. This is the longest one. It has a length of 1,100 meters. So this is the facade that you also see here on this book. It's quite famous. The Karl Marx Hof was planned to house 5,000 to 6,000 people. So that's almost a city in itself. And it says, consequently, it was provided with the necessary infrastructural facilities of a small town. The occupants were provided with numerous modern and well-equipped service facilities, including 2 central laundries, 2 large bathhouses with steam baths, 2 kindergartens, a dentist, a mother's advice center, a party local, a workers' library and a youth center, tuberculosis clinic, post office, a pharmacist, municipal interior furnishing and advice center, several waiting rooms, restaurants, and a total of 25 shops. So you can tell that this really was a bit of a holistic approach where you had laundries, bathhouses, doctors, and childcare centers. You were really taken care of in one of these buildings. And some of these facilities still exist. Here's the entry to one of the laundries. It's called Waschsalon. And over here we have the kindergarten. It's still run by the city of Vienna. Here's the entry, and this is the yard where the children can play. There's a lot of green around. There's many different trees. I think some of the entrances are a bit too massive. But maybe that's what a big facade like that needed. Alright. Now, let's look at something that's a little bit different. One of these garden cities, the Sandleitenhof. Again, you have these big gates that lead into the courtyards with these decorative elements. You have a facade that's nicely structured. And balconies and many windows, fountains and a staircase where you can sit, and a lot of green. So it's inviting you to spend some time outside. But you can probably tell that this does look a little different. The houses are a bit smaller. So these garden cities were, at least in this case, this one was constructed by 3 different architectural teams, and they constructed it sort of on the outskirts where you get to the vineyards. This says here the complex is typical of the spread out form of development with open garden courtyards and buildings facing the street, laid out according to picturesque romantic principles. However, the model of an autonomous garden city on the edge of the city was combined with metropolitan elements of multi-story peripheral construction, producing a mixed ensemble of squares and courtyards. One striking feature is the articulation of the street space with the formation of intimate squares, enclosures of spaces, and the breaking up of the building structures by means of main building sections or bridge-like structures crossing above roads. So that's a bit of a different type. Right, now let's look at one more thing. Because the city of Vienna didn't just build houses, they also built these public baths, such as the Amalienbad in the 10th district. It was a typical proletarian district. And when it was opened, the mayor, Karl Seitz, said, that's exactly why they built this bathhouse there. Because the proletarian masses had a right of access to light and air and water. Here you have the Schwimmhalle, so the pool where you can swim. Here you have the staircases leading to the changing rooms, or you can also change behind one of these doors here. And here on the side, you can see an area that is part of the sauna. There's a small pool in the middle and this beautiful glass construction on top. And all of these nice turquoise, blue and yellow tiles. The building was damaged in the Second World War, but it's been restored since. And you can still go there and spend a nice day. So the time of Red Vienna came to an end in 1934, but I think these buildings are really typical for the city and make it what it is, just as much as the famous buildings along the ring. And if you ever come to Vienna, just look around and I'm sure you'll see one of these buildings. Thank you for watching.